You thought you could outsmart me. I whispered it to myself as I stepped into the quiet apartment, unaware that the shadow behind me was already moving. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, and the soft hum of the heater was the only sound, until a click made every nerve in my body tighten. Victor Kane stood there, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light, a man of 65 whose presence filled the room without a word. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned me with a precision that made me step back instinctively. Emily Parker, 24, coffee-stained apron still clinging to my shirt, heart hammering in my chest. The door clicked shut behind him, and a quiet finality settled over the space, a lock I hadn't expected, a test I hadn't asked for. I froze, my hand resting on the counter, fingers curling into the wood, trying to gather sense from the sudden stillness. His gaze didn't move from me, but the weight it carried made it impossible to breathe freely. He didn't speak, yet his aura broadcast a message louder than words ever could, every movement, every breath, every thought observed, evaluated, measured. I swallowed hard, trying to piece together how a normal evening, returning from my third shift at the cafe, had warped into this tense ballet of authority and caution. Victor stepped closer, each movement deliberate, silent, as if the space itself bent to his will. I caught sight of his hands, the way they hovered near the edges of his coat, relaxed yet controlled, hinting at power not just claimed but inherent. The heater's hum now felt like a heartbeat against mine, each pulse echoing in the tension between us. I took a step back, feeling the cool hardwood beneath my sneakers, realizing that retreating had no meaning here. The room had shrunk around us, every corner watched, every exit measured. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what he wanted, what this sudden enclosure was meant to reveal, but every instinct told me it was a lesson in control, a challenge in restraint. My pulse pounded in my ears, yet I forced my breathing into slow, steady counts, noticing the subtle details, the way light caught his silver-streaked hair, the faint creases along his tailored suit, the intensity behind his storm-colored eyes. Time seemed to elongate, the quiet stretching with purpose, each second a test. I shifted slightly, daring to glance at the door, then back to him, noting that he made no motion toward it, yet the certainty of its locked state anchored me in the present, a subtle reminder that in this space, in this moment, I was under his observation, his rules. And then, with a faint shift of his weight, he indicated the start of the unspoken game, a challenge laid bare without words. My stomach tightened, but a spark of defiance lit within me. I was cautious, alert, aware, but not yet resigned. The room smelled faintly of polished oak and lingering coffee, a combination that grounded me as I readied myself for what was to come. Victor's eyes never left mine, the quiet assertion of his presence a constant pulse in the room, demanding attention, demanding compliance without force, a silent communication of dominance that left no room for doubt. And there I stood, Emily Parker, facing the calculated gaze of a man whose age belied the absolute control he wielded. The lock clicked, the game begun, and every breath became part of the intricate dance of power, observation, and tension that held us suspended, waiting, testing, and revealing all at once. The room seemed to shrink around me as I took a cautious step toward the center, each movement measured, careful not to provoke a reaction, yet fully aware that every motion was being observed. Victor Kane did not speak, but the air between us vibrated with silent authority, a tension that wrapped the apartment in an invisible web. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping against the quiet hum of the heater, a reminder that time had slowed and every second now carried weight. My eyes flicked to the door, noting the lock, the subtle click that confirmed it was secure, and a cold awareness settled over me. There was no turning back. I shifted slightly, testing the space, observing the arrangement of furniture, the way shadows pooled in corners, the faint reflection of light on polished surfaces, each detail catalogued by the intensity of his gaze. Victor moved subtly, a step to the left, and the room seemed to follow him, every shadow bending as he passed. I noticed the faint scent of his cologne, clean, assertive, with a hint of cedar and leather, a signature of a man who commanded his surroundings effortlessly. My mind raced through possibilities, each scenario weighed and discarded in a flash, yet none offered a clear path to escape or even control. I realized that the game he had initiated was not about traps or threats, it was about observation, understanding limits, measuring reactions. I tried to steady my breathing, slow it, anchor myself in the moment, even as adrenaline coiled in my veins. Victor's eyes remained fixed on mine, unwavering, challenging without words, a test of composure, of presence. I shifted again, a small movement toward the kitchen counter, the surface smooth under my fingers, grounding me, giving a semblance of control in the overwhelming stillness. My mind replayed every detail from the past hour, the ordinary evening that had morphed into this high-stakes exercise of power and awareness, each memory sharp, precise. The subtle creak of his shoes on the hardwood floor reminded me of the weight he carried in each step, a reminder that in this room, every action had consequence, even without force applied. I took a deeper breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, expanding my chest, giving me presence, a small assertion of myself within his field of observation. Victor tilted his head slightly, a nuanced gesture that conveyed recognition, acknowledgement, a quiet calibration of distance and attention. I understood then that this was a dance of presence, a challenge of perception, and a silent negotiation of power, unspoken but absolute. Every flicker of light, every shadow, every minute sound became a signal, a language that we alone shared in the charged silence. I adjusted my stance, feeling the weight of the apartment beneath my feet, sensing the boundaries set not by walls but by his attentive presence. Each breath I took was deliberate, measured, a small assertion of self within the authority that filled the room. I felt my focus sharpen, senses heightened, attuned to the subtlest of cues. Aware that in this space, observation was the currency, composure the strategy. The faint tick of a clock on the wall marked the passage of time, each second stretched, exaggerated by the intensity of attention, and yet within the stretch, I discovered clarity, a still point amidst the controlled tension. I exhaled slowly, feeling the muscles in my shoulders ease slightly, a small acknowledgement that I could endure, that awareness and presence could meet observation without yielding. Victor's posture remained unchanged, commanding yet unaggressive, a silent assertion of dominance balanced by restraint. In that suspended moment, I recognized the complexity of the interaction. It was not fear he sought, but awareness, not compliance, but engagement. The room was a crucible, and in the stillness, I began to navigate its rules, understanding that power was expressed not just through action, but through quiet observation, and that every choice I made, measured or impulsive, was part of the evolving dialogue of presence between us. I shifted my weight slightly, feeling the smooth wood under my fingers, grounding myself as I surveyed the apartment with more awareness than I ever had before. Every shadow, every reflection on the polished surfaces, every flicker of light became a signal I instinctively read, a language of presence that Victor Kane had established without a single word. His gaze remained fixed, unwavering, yet it carried not aggression but measurement, a quiet challenge that demanded attention and composure. I took a slow breath, counting each second as it passed, noticing the faint hum of the heater blending with the subtle creak of the hardwood floor beneath my sneakers. The apartment, small and neatly arranged, felt alive under his scrutiny, every object a test, every movement a response. I allowed my eyes to roam, taking in the faint shimmer of light on the silver handles of the kitchen cabinets, the muted reflection of the window panes, the patterned rug under my feet that now seemed to anchor me in the moment. Victor shifted slightly, a subtle pivot that did not break the tension but accentuated it, a quiet demonstration of presence that reminded me of the careful balance of observation and control. I realized then that this was more than a simple interaction, it was a study in boundaries, in the silent communication of space and attention. I straightened, letting my shoulders relax while keeping my movements deliberate, aware that the small adjustments I made were being noted, catalogued, and understood. My mind worked quickly, evaluating, anticipating, measuring the tempo of his subtle gestures, yet never attempting to challenge the order he maintained. I reached for a glass on the counter, its cool surface smooth against my palm, and the action felt monumental, a delicate assertion of self within the framework of his authority. Victor inclined his head slightly, acknowledging my choice, the silent rhythm between us deepening with each heartbeat. I shifted again, this time toward the center of the room, feeling the space around me, the weight of each step, the air moving in response to our presence. Time stretched, elongated by the intensity of focus, and I began to recognize patterns, the cadence of his observation, the ebb and flow of awareness that defined the interaction. My breath grew steady, deliberate, a small victory in the exercise of patience and presence. The faint ticking of the clock on the wall marked the passage of measured seconds, each one an opportunity to assert balance, to exist within the framework without resistance. I glanced briefly toward the window, noting the soft glow of streetlights filtered through the blinds, anchoring me further in reality. Victor did not move, yet the weight of his attention was palpable, a constant pulse that demanded composure and awareness. I allowed my mind to clear, focusing on subtle details, the way light kissed the edges of the countertop, the reflection in the polished wood, the faint aroma of cedar lingering in the air, and in that attention, I found clarity, a way to navigate the charged space without relinquishing myself entirely. Every inhalation, every subtle shift of my weight, every glance became part of a silent conversation, a measured exchange of awareness and presence. I realized that endurance was as important as observation, that presence could meet scrutiny without yielding, and that each choice, no matter how minute, contributed to the evolving balance of power within the room. Victor's eyes, storm-colored and unwavering, followed every action, and in that gaze, I felt both challenge and acknowledgement, the delicate equilibrium of a silent negotiation that had no words, only shared understanding. In that suspended moment, Emily Parker existed fully, alert and aware, navigating the invisible rules laid before her, testing, observing, responding, every breath a conscious step in the unfolding dynamic of authority, presence, and attention that defined the space we now shared. The subtle tension in the room shifted as I moved a step closer to the window, my eyes tracing the outline of the city lights filtering through the blinds. Emily Parker, steadying herself on the edge of the counter, could feel the presence of Victor Kane like a weight pressing down on the air around her, not oppressive, but insistently present. The faint hum of the heater, the distant sirens from the street below, and the soft ticking of the clock became markers in the rhythm of the apartment, punctuating the silent dialogue between us. I caught the slight change in his posture, a subtle tilt of the shoulders, the way his gaze softened almost imperceptibly as he observed my movements, and it created a strange sense of balance, a momentary relief in the carefully measured tension. Every object in the apartment now held significance, the polished wooden table, the small stack of books neatly arranged on the shelf, even the faint reflection of the ceiling light on the floor became part of the awareness we shared. I inhaled slowly, feeling the cool air move through the space, grounding me, sharpening my senses to the smallest changes in sound and light. Victor's presence was constant, commanding, yet restrained, and I realized that the unspoken rules he set were less about control through coercion and more about teaching presence, awareness, and observation. I moved toward the center of the room, adjusting my stance to stand taller, my shoulders back, breathing deliberately to steady my nerves. The subtle shifts in his expression, the tiniest lift of an eyebrow, the controlled movement of his hand, all conveyed information, a language without words that demanded both attention and respect. I allowed myself to notice the textures around me, the smooth surface of the countertop beneath my fingertips, the softness of the rug under my shoes, the faint scent of cedar in the air, and each observation became a small anchor, a point of clarity amidst the charged atmosphere. As I adjusted the angle of my body, stepping slightly to the left, Victor's eyes followed, unwavering, registering, analyzing, acknowledging my choice. I felt the balance between observation and action, the delicate interplay of control and compliance, awareness and endurance. Time stretched in this suspended moment, every second elongated by the intensity of our mutual attention, yet within that stretch, I discovered a rhythm, a way to navigate the silent challenge he had set. My mind catalogued every nuance, the subtle bend of his wrist, the faint line of his jaw, the quiet dominance in the set of his shoulders, and I began to anticipate his expectations without overstepping, moving with purpose yet carefully measured restraint. The air felt alive, charged with attention, and I realized that endurance was not just a test of patience but a demonstration of awareness, a way to assert presence without breaking the flow of the interaction. I exhaled slowly, feeling the calm begin to steady my heartbeat, knowing that each breath, each shift in posture, each deliberate glance was part of a silent conversation, a negotiation of presence and authority that unfolded without a single word spoken. In that shared awareness, Emily Parker found a sense of clarity, a way to exist fully in the room, moving with careful intention, observing, adapting, responding, each moment a continuation of the delicate equilibrium that Victor Kane maintained, a test of presence, patience, and understanding that held us both suspended in a state of focused, alert, and deliberate attention. The faint hum of the heater filled the silence as I shifted my stance, feeling the smooth hardwood beneath my sneakers and the subtle vibration of the apartment around me. Emily Parker, acutely aware of every detail in the room, let her gaze travel across the polished surfaces, the neatly stacked books, the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the blinds. Victor Kane remained in his measured position, his presence filling the space, a constant and unspoken reminder of the rules that governed this quiet interaction. I inhaled slowly, letting the air fill my lungs fully, grounding myself in the moment while my eyes flicked to the locked door, confirming again that every path of retreat was carefully controlled, yet the control was not forceful, it was observation, awareness, the quiet assertion of dominance. The subtle cadence of his movements, the almost imperceptible adjustment of his shoulders, the shift of his gaze, all spoke a language I was learning to read, a silent dialogue of presence, patience, and anticipation. I moved deliberately toward the center of the apartment, my shoulders back, hands relaxed but aware, noting the texture of the rug underfoot, the cool edge of the countertop my fingers brushed as I passed, each sensation anchoring me further into the awareness that this was more than a room, it was a space of measured attention and controlled tension. Victor's eyes tracked every motion, storm-colored and unwavering, registering, evaluating, acknowledging each small decision I made, and I realized that endurance and careful observation were now the keys to navigating this environment without misstep. My breathing became more conscious, deliberate, each inhalation and exhalation a rhythm to steady the nerves that hummed through my body. The subtle reflection of light on the polished wood, the faint shimmer of the silver handles, even the small shadow cast by the stack of books, all became markers in this silent exchange, each cue a thread in the intricate web of interaction we had created. I allowed myself to notice the faint cedar scent lingering in the air, the quiet click of the clock marking time in deliberate increments, and in this attention, I found a rhythm, a quiet understanding of the boundaries established without words. Every subtle gesture of Victor's, every shift in posture, every glance was information, a language conveyed through presence and awareness, and I moved with that language, adjusting, responding, aligning without losing the sense of self that I clung to as a measure of control. The room seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, a shared awareness that transformed every object, every breath, every subtle sound into a signal, a communication without words, a test of composure and perception. I felt my focus sharpen, senses heightened, attuned to the smallest changes in motion and light, and I realized that this moment, suspended and intense, was a continuation of the unspoken negotiation we had been conducting, a delicate balance of authority and endurance, observation and response, that defined the dynamic of the space and the interaction between Emily Parker and Victor Kane. A precise choreography of presence that left no room for misstep and demanded absolute attention to the quiet rules of engagement. The air in the apartment seemed to thicken as I took a deliberate step closer to the window, my hand brushing against the cool glass as I traced the outline of the city lights beyond. Emily Parker could feel the weight of Victor Kane's attention like a presence pressing gently but persistently against her awareness, not intrusive but undeniably commanding. Every detail of the room now felt heightened, the faint reflection of light on the polished wooden surfaces, the subtle shadows cast by the stacked books on the shelf, the quiet hum of the heater vibrating through the floorboards beneath my feet. Victor remained poised, his posture unyielding yet calm, a constant in the charged atmosphere that demanded observation, patience, and careful thought. I shifted slightly, moving toward the center of the apartment, allowing my movements to be deliberate, measured, each step conscious of the boundaries established by his presence. My eyes caught the faint shimmer on the silver handles of the cabinets, the smooth texture of the countertop beneath my fingertips, and the muted glow of the city reflecting through the blinds, each detail a marker grounding me in the reality of the moment. Victor's gaze followed each subtle adjustment. Unwavering and precise, registering every movement, every breath, every blink, and I began to understand the rhythm of his observation, the silent language of attention and control. I inhaled slowly, drawing the cool air fully into my lungs, letting it steady the pulse racing through my chest, each exhale releasing tension while reinforcing my awareness. The apartment, though small and familiar, felt transformed, alive under the pressure of measured scrutiny, and I realized that endurance was now both a skill and a strategy, that presence itself was a form of communication, a silent negotiation unfolding between us. I adjusted my stance again, shoulders squared, weight balanced, allowing my body to convey calm while every sense remained alert to the smallest cues, the subtle bend of his wrist, the controlled lift of his chin, the quiet shift in his gaze. Each of these became part of the intricate dance of awareness we were engaged in, a conversation without words where observation and composure spoke louder than anything verbal. My breathing maintained a steady rhythm, the inhale and exhale marking time in a slow, deliberate cadence, anchoring me within the flow of attention and focus that Victor had established. I allowed myself to notice the faint scent of cedar lingering in the air, the slight vibration of the heater, the pattern of light on the floor, integrating these cues into my awareness as tools to navigate the interaction without misstep. Every movement, every glance, every subtle shift became a response, part of the dynamic balance of authority and presence, the silent challenge he had set that I was learning to meet with intention, patience, and careful calculation. In that suspended state, I felt a growing clarity, a focus sharpened by attention and understanding, aware that every choice I made contributed to the evolving equilibrium of control and endurance, presence and observation, that defined the apartment, the space we shared, and the delicate, intricate connection between Emily Parker and Victor Kane. The atmosphere in the apartment shifted subtly as I moved toward the corner of the room, my hand brushing against the edge of the bookshelf. Feeling the smooth grain beneath my fingertips. Emily Parker's senses were heightened, every sound amplified, from the distant hum of traffic outside to the faint creak of the floorboards under Victor Kane's measured steps. The room felt alive with attention, a quiet tension that wrapped around us without a single spoken word. Victor's gaze followed each subtle movement, storm-colored eyes unwavering, capturing every detail with a calm precision that made the air itself feel charged. I took a slow breath, deliberately filling my lungs, anchoring myself, letting awareness settle in every fiber of my being, understanding that each movement, each gesture, each glance carried weight in this silent exchange. The faint reflection of light on the countertop, the subtle glint from the polished wooden floors, even the pattern of shadows cast by the window blinds became markers, guiding my perception, helping me navigate the invisible rules that governed this interaction. Victor shifted slightly, a subtle adjustment of his posture, and I sensed not a threat but a measured calibration, an invitation to engage within the boundaries he had set. My shoulders relaxed marginally, yet my attention sharpened, absorbing the cues, cataloging them, integrating them into the rhythm of observation that now defined the room. Each inhalation and exhalation became deliberate, a steady cadence to maintain presence, to assert awareness without breaking the equilibrium, and I noticed how even the smallest actions, like the adjustment of my feet on the rug or the tilt of my head, were being registered, evaluated, understood. The apartment, though familiar, had transformed into a study of perception and presence, a space where endurance was measured not by action but by awareness, where attention itself became the language of interaction. I allowed my eyes to trace the outlines of objects, the stacked books, the faint gleam of metal on the door handles, the glow of the city through the blinds, each detail feeding into a growing clarity of how to move, how to respond, how to exist fully in the moment without disrupting the balance. Victor's silent authority filled the space, and I realized that understanding his intent required patience, composure, and careful observation, that my presence was a contribution to the ongoing dialogue of control and awareness. I shifted again, carefully, deliberately, noting how the subtle changes in his expression, the smallest flicker of his gaze, provided information, guidance, and reassurance within the intensity of the exchange. My breathing remained steady, deliberate, each inhale and exhale reinforcing the awareness that every choice, every motion, was part of a shared understanding, a negotiation of presence that defined both of us in this apartment. In that focused attention, Emily Parker found a quiet confidence, a sense of agency within the constraints of observation, moving with intention, reading the cues, responding thoughtfully, engaged fully in the evolving dynamic between herself and Victor Kane, a delicate balance of control, endurance, and mutual presence that held the room suspended in a charged, silent conversation. The apartment held a stillness that felt almost tangible as I adjusted my stance, my hands lightly resting on the countertop while my eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. Emily Parker felt an acute awareness of the space around her, each object, each shadow, each reflection a guide in the silent language Victor Kane had established. His presence was constant, a steady force that did not waver, yet it carried no aggression, only the weight of observation and authority. The faint hum of the heater and the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the blinds punctuated the silence, creating a rhythm to which I attuned myself, each breath deliberate, each movement carefully measured. Victor shifted slightly, the subtle tilt of his head and the controlled adjustment of his posture conveying acknowledgement, a quiet recognition of the awareness I maintained. I took a measured step toward the center of the room, feeling the polished hardwood beneath my shoes, noting the way light glanced off the silver handles of the cabinets and the gentle shadows cast by the stacked books. Every sensation became a point of reference, a marker that allowed me to navigate the charged space with presence and composure. My breathing remained steady, deliberate, each inhalation and exhalation reinforcing my focus and attention, a subtle assertion of awareness within the framework of his authority. Victor's gaze followed every nuance, storm-colored eyes absorbing each shift in posture, every micro-movement, registering, evaluating, acknowledging without a word, and in that silent interaction, I understood the depth of presence required to engage without disrupting the balance. I allowed myself to notice the faint scent of cedar in the air, the smooth texture of the countertop under my fingers, the soft pattern of light on the floor, integrating these details into my awareness as guides in this intricate exercise of observation. Each movement I made, from adjusting my weight to the tilt of my head, became part of a larger conversation, a negotiation conducted entirely through presence and attention. The room seemed to pulse with quiet energy, a suspended dynamic in which every choice and action was observed, catalogued, and responded to with subtle precision. I felt a growing clarity, a sense of confidence emerging from the deliberate attention to detail, recognizing that endurance, composure, and conscious awareness were the keys to navigating this environment. Victor's silent authority shaped the rhythm of the interaction, and I matched it with careful intention, responding thoughtfully, observing acutely, maintaining presence while respecting the space he had established. In that moment, suspended between observation and response, Emily Parker discovered a new understanding of control and attention, a sense of agency within the constraints of awareness, moving deliberately, breathing consciously, engaged fully in the evolving equilibrium of the room, the shared understanding, and the intricate connection between herself and Victor Kane that had formed without a single word spoken, a balance of observation, patience, and mutual presence that held both of them in the charged, quiet rhythm of the apartment. The room seemed to hold its breath as I shifted slightly, feeling the polished hardwood beneath my feet, the smooth countertop under my fingers, and the subtle vibration of the heater resonating through the floor. Emily Parker could sense that every detail mattered now, that the space itself had become a participant in the silent dialogue with Victor Kane. His storm-colored eyes tracked each movement with calm precision, a presence that was both commanding and measured, demanding attention without a single word spoken. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the air fill my lungs completely, grounding myself, centering my awareness on the smallest cues, the soft reflection of the city lights through the blinds, the subtle shadows cast by the books stacked neatly on the shelf, the faint glint of metal on the door handles. Victor's posture remained unyielding but relaxed, a quiet assertion of control that was steady and absolute. Each subtle movement I made, a shift in weight, the tilt of my head, the adjustment of my shoulders, became part of an intricate conversation conducted entirely through presence and observation. My senses sharpened further, attuned to the rhythm of the room, the ebb and flow of attention, the delicate interplay of awareness and patience that defined the space. The apartment, though familiar, felt transformed into a study of perception, a controlled environment where endurance, composure, and deliberate observation determined the flow of interaction. I allowed my mind to catalog every detail, from the texture of the rug beneath my sneakers to the faint scent of cedar lingering in the air, integrating each into a growing sense of clarity and presence. Victor's gaze did not waver, each subtle flicker of expression, each micro-movement, conveyed information and expectation, a silent dialogue that I responded to with careful attention. My breathing maintained a deliberate, steady rhythm, each inhalation and exhalation reinforcing my focus, allowing me to exist fully in the charged atmosphere without disruption, navigating the invisible boundaries he had established. I shifted once more, deliberately, noting how the light played across the surfaces, how shadows stretched and bent with each movement, how the smallest sound, even my own heartbeat, became part of the unspoken rhythm that governed the room. In that suspended state, I recognized the depth of presence required to engage, the patience necessary to maintain balance, and the awareness needed to respond appropriately. Every glance, every motion, every measured breath was part of a continuing exchange, a negotiation of attention and composure, control and endurance. Emily Parker felt a quiet confidence rising within her, a sense of agency in the careful observation, a capacity to navigate the charged space with intention and clarity. The delicate equilibrium of observation, presence, and patience held the room in a suspended, almost tangible tension, and in that shared focus, both Emily Parker and Victor Kane existed fully, engaged in a precise, silent interplay that conveyed understanding, recognition, and a mutual respect for the rules of presence that defined the apartment and the moment, leaving the air thick with awareness and the quiet satisfaction of a balance maintained through conscious, deliberate attention.